Everything that you've been taught in school is their system, what they want you to learn. I think our time for having the ability to do anything about it is constantly diminishing, and I think we see that in just the overt disregard of even the false flag. They don't care anymore. Sustained protest. If you look back to the 50s, this stuff was very couched and hidden to a very sleepy audience. The audience ain't so sleepy anymore, and yet it hasn't become more hidden. It's become more overt. When you look at school, what you've been taught is how to function within their system. You have been taught nothing about the system. Sustained protest. They're playing a game. You're looking at a system, and the system doesn't stop. They're playing a game.
It's so weird. I haven't had this problem before. Like trying to get somebody in here.
There are certain bloodlines or families that get the real education that not only tells you how to work within the system, but it tells you about the system. And that system has been hidden from 90-some% probably of this planet. So here we are, babes in the woods, scrambling to try to catch up, basically. But we can see people who have the ability to catch on need to catch on quick. And they need to start saying no. No to the magistrate. No to all these systems of control.
Hello, boy. Hey, boy.
Did you come in?
Hello.
You're looking at a system, and the system doesn't stop.
Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Okay, I was just gonna let the song play out.
They're playing a game. They need to understand that they're human beings, and they have, whether they choose to view it as a God-given ability or a created ability, that far surpasses what they have been allowed to know about themselves. We've been lied to for a long time, and for people who understand the deception on a massive level that we see down here with like Sandy Hook, or those who have come to understand what 9/11 really was, nothing like we were told. Moon landings. When you understand the scope of the deception of our lives that we have grown up with, thinking that the world is one way, when in fact, it is not the way you have been told. You have to start to take the macro view. And what you will find, I believe, what I have found, is there's no exit to this. Look at any of these events that we see weekly now. that are made up in the media. There's no edge to the deception. You look up to the stars, you're still looking at the same ball of wax.
Sustained protest.
They're playing a game.
All right. Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm a little disappointed I didn't get to work today, though. I'm not salary, so I get paid by the hour. So if I don't work, I don't get paid.
What's happened? Is it bad weather?
Yeah, but what's surprising is unless they know something that's not out there right now, we didn't get but maybe 2 or 3 inches. It wasn't very. I mean, I've had to drive. I've had to drive through a lot worse with this company before, so it's really strange. For some reason, I don't know.
Well, what was the forecast?
I don't pay attention to that stuff, man. I just go out and get surprised.
Yeah.
I say, surprise me.
Are the roads gritted and salted during the winter?
Homo says what?
Gritted and salted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so anyway. Yeah, I guess we could just kind of pick back up on where we were talking about the flat Earth debate earlier. The thing that I am always struck with when we have people who come on who seem to want to have an honest discussion, when they are asked to do something that's very simple, it seems like they're not able to address the issue. For instance, a lot of times Nathan will ask, or even Anthony or Chocolate or even me, will ask a question that's a closed-ended question. It's a yes or no.
I think that
but
guy
they don't,
came.
They don't give us a yes or no question, or a yes or no answer.
That guy came on today probably with a rehearsed scenario. I'll ask this and this and this, and therefore he would know which way to go. But Nathan shot him down almost immediately.
Well, that's the whole thing, right? I think that that's why I texted you and said we should do a show, because I think that we would allow the person to run with his thought.
I would like to talk to that guy again.
I'm sorry?
I'd like to talk to that guy again on his terms.
Yeah.
If you're coming into Nathan's show, you know what to expect, or at least you should do.
All right.
It's going to be hostile.
Yeah. Yeah, which is unfortunate. I mean, it's entertaining to a certain extent, but then it's also tedious because you actually want to have a conversation with someone who's not an obnoxious troll who just is coming in to argue. But I really do feel like it was an interesting dynamic today that, and I don't know. I mean, when I see people like that come in and they don't seem to be able to think on their feet and just simply express their thoughts, I try to figure out what's going on. Is it just a high level of cognitive dissonance so that they can't actually be objective, or are they trolling? Which I guess in the ultimate sense of a negative troll, that is, they come in exclusively to just be obnoxious and not offer anything substantial.
The guy yesterday, Bob the science guy, he deserves all he gets because he's just a nasty.
Well, yeah, I guess to a certain extent. I mean, I think though that even he expressed, in my opinion, he expressed that same thing. He wouldn't answer the question directly. I mean, he was given direct questions that were able to be answered, and he seemed a bit more disingenuous than the guy that was there today.
Yeah, I mean, the guy, we didn't give him an inch. And I would love to know where exactly he stood. Whereas yesterday, we know Bob the Science Guy, we've seen his stuff, and he deserves all he gets. But the guy today, I would like to have heard where he was going to go, because he'd obviously got something in his mind. He'd got a thought pattern that he wanted us to follow, but he couldn't get off first base. Nathan wouldn't let him.
I lost you, Mark, so I don't know if it's me or you.
I don't know. What was I saying? This guy had obviously got a thought process that he wanted to go through with us, but Nathan wouldn't let him get beyond first base.
Okay, so we got P Mars in our peanut gallery. Okay, so he's throwing out the idea that we are giving loaded questions that are intended to trap. But I would disagree, because the guy today was given a simple question. What is the scientific method?
Yeah.
You know, what is the scientific method? Or do you know what the scientific method is? And then
when he came on, he said, "You guys," and he linked us all as though we had a uniform thought. And when he started, I didn't agree with his assumption of what I believed, but he had assumed what Riley believed, and Riley jumped in immediately. And at that point, I didn't stand a chance of expressing my thoughts. The density buoyancy debate has nothing to do with the shape of the Earth.
Well, I disagree to a certain extent, because I think, again, the whole argument for gravity is dependent upon the heliocentric model. So it's related to.
Yeah, that's the bigger picture. They need gravity. We don't. And so it doesn't tell us what the shape of the Earth is. Do you know what I mean by that?
I understand to a certain extent.
Did you hear Globebusters at weekend?
Yeah, I listened to a bit of it. I think about half of it I got through, and then
because later on, Bob agrees. No, he doesn't agree with me. I never spoke to him, but Bob would be, from my point of view, that there is a force that goes downwards, and he said that to Riley. He says, "You and I disagree on this point," and Riley didn't challenge him. Riley would challenge me, because he doesn't think I have any credibility, but he backed down from Bob, and there's a sub debate within Flat Earth of what this up-down proportional gravity is. And when that guy came in today, he's talking about heliocentrism, Newton and Einstein, where me and Anthony would bicker about something that's not really that important.
Okay, so you think that that's what Bob was saying? Bob was addressing the density buoyancy thing, and because I wasn't surprised, but I guess I was, now that I think back to it. I was a little bit surprised that Anthony didn't pipe up. But it also could be, though, Mark, that that's not his platform, and he doesn't feel like he's got the ability to throw his bulk around. Whereas the flat Earth debate, he has that ability, and he can do that. So I don't think that I don't know, but I don't think that he necessarily discounts what you think. He just has the freedom on the flat Earth debate to be a little bit more boisterous.
Yeah, it has a certain flavor that he can push his weight about in. But
I would have been interested to ask the guy who came on today to explain to us what his idea on the scientific method is, because he said something to the effect that the scientific method is more complicated, or the scientific method isn't as simple as that. And so my question would have been, okay, so what's the scientific method for you? Because that was the sticking point for him. He disagreed with the methodology of the scientific method.
Nathan wouldn't let him expand on it, though.
I know.
Nathan's almost as religious as they are.
What do you mean by that?
Well, Nathan insisted that the empirical evidence is what you need. That's the ultimate, and that's the end. And he wasn't prepared to listen to somebody else's point of view. And the guy didn't get his idea forward. Empirical evidence is what you observe and what you feel. It's about what you interpret. It's not necessarily truth, though. Empirical evidence also has to be falsifiable.
Well, I don't know that I would say empirical evidence has to be falsifiable. I would say the interpretation of the empirical evidence is what you falsify.
Yeah. If you're saying what you observe, then you brought it into the sort of the human mind, and the human mind is flawed because it's looking for confirmation bias. Soundley's bridge, for instance, shows a curve, and the ballers latch onto that, and they say that's empirical evidence. And yet, when we look at Ranti's evidence and work, we say, see, that's flat. And we feel that that is empirical evidence. Well, it's the human psyche that starts off with a presupposition that I'm right, and I'm looking for evidence to support that. Whereas falsifiability is the key to being honest. Whatever your position is, go out not to prove it's right, but to prove that it's wrong. And that, to me, is real science.
Well, I think that then that becomes the challenge that I gave to Jose. That is that I'd like to see how he eliminated the variables.
Yes. Yeah.
So that would be, you know, I guess what I hear you saying to a certain extent is that if I have an hypothesis about an empirical observation, are you suggesting, I guess, because I'm just thinking about this right now again, since you mentioned it, so I'm just trying to play it out in my mind. If I have an experience and I'm trying to understand the nature and cause of that experience.
Yeah, if we are using confirmation bias, how do we know we are? See, it seems like there's a trap there.
Well, at the same time, though, when we talk about presuppositions, and this gets into an aspect of circular argument, because I would say that everything's circular. You can't escape it. It just depends on how well you argue your case. But if we have a worldview, if we have an operating system, and we function within that operating system, then we're just simply doing what is consistent within that operating system.
Yeah, as long as we are cold, clinical, and scientific. How do we know that we're not suffering from confirmation bias?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's, I guess, right. But to a certain extent, there is going to be an aspect in which confirmation bias doesn't exist in a particular situation. Because if, for instance, reality A is the cause of reality B, and that means that I believe that reality A is real, and then I experience reality C, I believe that I have to operate that on the basis that reality A is true, so that influences the way I interpret reality C. So I can't not interpret reality C apart from my presuppositions. I can't. I wouldn't be consistent. So
Yeah.
I don't know that it's necessarily a valid accusation to say that simply because I'm taking reality A into reality C that I'm biased, or that I'm simply trying to confirm something I'm already committed to. I just don't think that we can be that inconsistent to a certain extent. We have to remain consistent to our operating system.
I agreed with Zinda today that science is there to be proved wrong. Science cannot say, we've got it right. It's an open system. Currently it's right, but if you can give us any information to show there's a flaw in the result or in the opinion, then correct me.
Well, here it is, Mark. I think that there has to be an ultimate major premise that has to win the day. If we argue minor premises and we disprove a minor premise among, if we disprove one minor premise among 10 minor premises, all we're going to do is hop from one minor premise to another, when completely throw out all 10 if the major premise itself is justified. And I think that has to be something. So let me ask you this question. What do you think in this whole discussion could you classify as the major premise that needs to be established?
I'm still stuck with Pilate. What is truth?
Okay, so why?
Because I meet somebody with absolute conviction that their point of view is true, and I can meet another guy with the absolute conviction that the opposite is true. And that makes me uncomfortable. That how can somebody be so right, and yet the antithesis is that they are right? I can't cope with that. And I think that science is currently right unless there's further information to be revealed. I'm not talking about pseudoscience. I believe in the scientific method. I absolutely believe in that.
Let me stop you real quick right there, Mark, and give us your rundown of what you would accept as an explanation for what the scientific process is.
Well, scientific is an adjective. The process is the noun. Nathan, Quantum Eraser, and Anthony say that science is the scientific method. I think that's a load of bullshit. Scientific is an adjective. It's the method that's the noun. Do you follow what I mean by that?
I need you to keep going.
What?
I need you to keep going. Keep it.
Okay. Science is, yes, it's based on hypotheses, and it's based on testing. Either is it true? Could it be false? It's a continuation. It's not. There's no finality to science. It's a continual process. We have to imagine that in the future, what is right today could possibly be wrong because further information has appeared. I'm going to mention this on Monday when I'm having the debate with Anthony. All swans are white, and if I go out to look for swans that are white to confirm my hypotheses, I will only find white swans. And after a lifetime of looking at swans, I've only found white ones. I cannot conclude that's the truth, because there may be a black one. Well, we know there are black ones. So science cannot, in any part of history, say we've got it right. There's no more to be said. There may be evidence to show that we're not right, and that's what Zinda was saying, and I agree with Zinda.
So can you get, I don't feel like you actually answered my question as to, like, if you were to express what you think is the scientific method, what are the elements?
Oh, okay. There is the method, but there may be a flaw in the method. The method is what you observe. You observe a phenomena, you create a hypothesis, you test that hypothesis, and you draw a conclusion. And you isolate all your variables and you draw a conclusion. You ask your peers, do you agree with this? And you might get a consensus of, yeah, you're right there. There has to be a question mark over the whole thing and say, however, in different circumstances, there may be another alternative as to what you observed and what the causes and effect were.
So what about the role of science to prove a thing?
No, science shouldn't prove anything. Science should only approach a subject with disprove it.
Okay, so I guess what I would say to you is prove your claim. Well, I mean, why is that the case?
Because confirmation bias can cloud your judgment.
Well, doesn't the accomplishment of the negative result in the positive? So if I disprove 9 hypotheses and I'm left with one, that seems to me an issue of splitting hairs.
Well, the one that you've left with, is it going to be true for the rest of eternity? Or could there possibly be evidence appear at a later date in different circumstances that prove it wrong?
I think that goes back to what first principles are, right? I mean, there are certain things that are true in every situation at all times, and so they do not change.
Are you familiar with deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I've looked at them specifically, but to me, deductive is more objective, inductive is more subjective.
Yeah, inductive is more like Occam's razor. It's likely to be the truth, but there are flaws. It's a strong argument, but there's weaknesses in it. Whereas deductive reasoning is absolute. Socrates is a man. All men are mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal. You start off with two premises that are true, and therefore you can only conclude truth. But if there's a flaw in any one of the premises, then you can't conclude absolutely that you've got the truth. Socrates is mortal. All men are mortal. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. Well, no, Socrates is my dog. That's what I call it. So there's a flaw there.
Yeah, I'm not. That's too abstract for me.
I struggle with doubts all the time because of confirmation bias. I cannot be totally confident in my own interpretation just in case I've approached it with a bias. At the moment, I'm reading or studying a philosopher called Karl Popper. Have you ever heard of him?
No.
He introduced the idea of falsifiability to science. That rather than approach science as confirming what you want you've got to approach all your hypotheses in, can I prove this wrong? Can I falsify it? And that has totally blown my mind. Up to this point.
I guess what I'm still hung up on is I'm not trying to say that confirming a bias is what I'm aiming at when I talk about science proving a thing. I suppose I understand. Like if I hypothesize that A is the result of B, and I want that to be the case, I'm either going to completely falsify my discovery and present false material intentionally and lie, or I'm not going to objectively consider other options, both of which are character flaws in terms of being honest. So I guess for me, it's almost like I don't even consider those two options. So the confirmation bias thing is something that I don't even consider. So I don't think about that in terms of proving. I guess in the long run, what I said earlier about if I have 10 hypotheses and I eliminate 9, and well, yeah, I'll just say that if I have 10 and I eliminate 9 and I'm left with 1, to me, I haven't disproven 9, I've proven 1.
Yeah, that would be inductive reasoning. It's quite likely that that's inductive reasoning. It's quite likely that you've arrived at the safest conclusion. But evidence or circumstances might appear later on to show that even your 10th one had a flaw in it.
Yeah, I suppose that I to say that that's an option. I guess again.
That's inductive reasoning. It's likely. It's Occam's razor. It's likely to be the most logical conclusion to it.
Yeah. See, I guess my experience with inductive in Bible college and seminary, and it seemed to me that was more concrete, while inductive is abstract. So if I arrive at a conclusion by deduction, that is elementary, dear Doxey. Yeah. Right. So it's concrete and it's it's empirical. But if I take if I've eliminated 9 of the options and I arrive at the 10th, and that one is the one that remains, that result. Now, if I take that final result, if I take the one that's left and I run with that principle into other areas and apply it without the same methodology, that's inductive. That's confirmation bias, or that's being prejudiced, so that I don't have necessarily justification to do that, but that's I believe A, so that when I come into B, C, or D in a new experience, and I apply A without justification, that's not deductive, that's inductive. That's subjective and abstract rather than concrete and empirical. That's the way it makes sense for me. I'm not sure if that contradicts what you were saying necessarily altogether, but that's the way those two terms in my mind.
If the terms are 9 out of 10, then you're pretty confident that 10 is right. And I would accept that until further evidence can be shown that it's erroneous.
You got a comment in chat with Nummy Num about Popper.
It is live, is it?
Yeah.
All right. Listen, Nummy Num, he's my hero.
I like Nummy.
Yeah, he is a. I don't know what. Forgive me, Nummy, if I'm talking wrong here, but you are the ultimate skeptic, and I think that's a good position to be in. What was he saying about Popper?
He said, I think Popper's principle that a scientific theory must be falsifiable to be scientific deals with a lot of the epistemological concerns being discussed here. So I think he's just giving us a thumbs up that we're talking good shit.
Will he join us?
I'm sure if he wants. I'll put the link. I'll put the link in Skype, Nummy, on my Red Hen Radio. Give me a second if you want to join.
I didn't know this was live.
It's called a Hangout, yo.
Yeah, okay. I take it back. All I said.
Oh yeah, right. You didn't know you were on the record.
You rascal.
No, I didn't even think about it. I just figured it was a given.
Bring
my computer is going so slow. All right, let me get the link. All right, he said he can join for a bit. So, Nummy, are you a group? Are you in the Red Hen group? Nora, you're in the Red Hen group. So if you want to join, you can join.
Nora's a good egg as well.
Nora's a peach.
She's an egg, a good egg.
She's a good bolt. She's a good pen. She's a good computer. I don't know what's slowing down my computer so badly. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm bored with you. I want Nora and Nominon to come.
Wow. Wow. Well, in the meantime.
Okay. So where were we? Yeah. Inductive and inductive reasoning. Deductive is where you start off with two premises that are true, and therefore you can conclude the truth. Whereas inductive, it's a bit vague, but it's likely to be true. Like you're 9 out of 10.
Yeah. Right. I guess that's part of what I'm saying too, is that you take the premise that you've got and you apply it in general to the next instance of experience.
Yeah. Yeah, but personal experience can give you a bias because we are flawed humans.
The Skype was taking too long, so I went through Hangouts for Nummy. I don't think I have Nora in Hangouts.
If I copy the same Hangout.
All right. The link is in Skype, Nora, if you want to check the Red Hen Radio and join us.
Yeah, cool. Are those album covers in the background?
Yeah. I didn't. If I ever, hey, Nummy.
Album covers in the background.
Yeah. I didn't. If I ever, hey, Nummy.
Hey, hold on for a second. Sorry, I got
it.
We got a newbie, Mark.
Is there no way you can? I'm not getting the link in the Skype. So the link is in the Skype.
I put
because
it.
I'm not.
Are you in the Red Hen Radio group?
Yes, but I'm not seeing it there. So maybe I'll try resetting my Skype, because for some reason, when you try to call me on Google here, it's only going to my phone, and I'd prefer to use my computer.
Well,
so hold on, I'm just going to.
The only thing I can say is that I just sent it through Skype right now. Skype was taking my computer's been kind of sluggish, so it was just taking a long time to load up for Skype.
Okay, so well, I'm just resetting Skype, so if I can,
okay,
maybe I'll see it there in a second, then I'll just rejoin.
All right.
Good man on me.
Yeah, those are album covers, Mark.
Okay. What is the
There's no rhyme or reason.
my phone won't stop vibrating. It's very weird.
Hi, Nora. Hello, Nora.
I'm kind of confused as to why I can't see that link in this RedHennRadio.
Well, Nora found it.
Did you see me say hi to you there?
You're on.
Hi.
Yeah, I know I'm
on.
Mark, but I want to change from the from my phone to my computer.
Okay, all right.
Sorry, I'm just having some confusion here. I mean, I can continue this class.
I just got your hi right now, and I'm sending you the link in that response.
Okay. So I'm just gonna leave here and then rejoin. Okay.
Good man, Nomi.
My screen is blank.
Hi, Nora.
Not your mind.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I'm just trying to figure this out.
How are you doing, Nora?
Can you see my icon, or do you see just like a blank red screen?
No, we can see a blue flower.
Yeah, blue flower.
Oh yeah, okay. Okay, so I guess I'm on. Yeah. I was just I was looking at a good example of the inductive reasoning there.
Go on.
My idea of inductive reasoning is that it's kind of it's sort of like, the way I think of it, Travis, is it's like your best guess, the most probable guess, instead of an absolute certainty from the premises. Isn't that true, Mark?
Yeah, that's how I understand it.
Is that how you understand it, Mark?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
More of a guess than a certainty, or as far as you can be certain, right?
The Occam's razor, it's the likely one.
I don't want to bring all these terms into it, but yeah, I see what you mean. Occam's razor could be applied to it, right?
Or it's about the weighing of circumstantial evidence, the preponderance of evidence, rather than the proof or the absolute evidence, because a lot of the time the absolute evidence is not available in a lot of cases.
Do you think it's really about evidence, or is it more just
can we say hello to Arwen first?
Logical. Oh, I didn't even see Arwen's there. Hi, Arwen.
Hello, guys.
Hi, Arwen. How are you?
Are we live?
I said hi to him.
I think we are.
The thing is that with an inductive argument, you end up with...
Travis, are we live?
Yeah, we are.
I think we are.
Hello, audience.
We're on the record.
So what I was going to say is that with an inductive argument, you can only end up with a probabilistic outcome. You don't end up with an absolute. Like the inductive reasoning is only
Nami, that's more or less what I meant by it's just your best guess. Do you see what I mean?
Sounds very nihilistic to me.
Like probably true instead of absolutely true. Yeah.
It's not nihilistic. I mean, a lot of just in our day-to-day lives, we end up having to employ inductive reasoning in a lot of cases. Just what's more likely, like, should I catch this bus, or should I wait for this bus or go catch that bus? And then you kind of have to guess based on your experiences, and that would be an example of everyday.
Really, you have time in your mind to actually spend on nitpicking about that kind of stuff?
Arwen, it's a given.
Seriously, do you have time? Do you have time during anything to nitpick about that kind of stuff with everything that's going on in the world right now?
Arwen, I'm trying to give an example
we're talking about systematic logic, and inductive and deductive reasoning are a thing.
Okay.
Yes.
Arwen, I'm giving an example to explain something in principle. So how that would actually apply to my...
I just took it too literal. Like, you're at a bus stop. Like, you have time to nitpick about details of the travel with everything going on in the world right now. Like, you're not going to be preoccupied with what you just saw on YouTube. The connections you laid out.
Don't be that guy, Arwen. Don't be that guy.
I am that guy,
This is getting derailed real quick. So if we're going to have I'd like to have a conversation along the lines of what you guys were discussing before, but if we're not going to do that, I think I'm just going to head out.
Well, let me try to bring us back and ask a question for you guys. So my question to you, though, is what's the basis for your inductive thought That's where I'm coming from in terms of making having a conclusion that was based on deduction, that was based on concrete empirical data. And then when you experience something else at a later point, you have that data. And then when you see that new information, you're bringing that into the interpretation of that new experience.
Here, Travis,
Okay.
if I give a, I'll just give a stock example of an inductive argument, okay? Because I think that when we discuss systematic logic and formal logic, it's kind of hard for people to visualize it without examples. So I'm just going to bring in an example. So you have two premises, and in this one, it says the first premise is every known predator has eyes to the front of its skull and not to the side, okay? So that's something that most people know, right? Every known predator has eyes to the front of its skull and not to the side. This is just an example. And then they say the second premise is carnivores lack flat molar teeth. Okay, so this is kind of like for fossil hunters to apply these two things. Okay, so you get those two
eyeless predators.
Yeah. Okay, so this is just the two premises that they give. These are things that they know so far. Okay, those are things you can observe or you've known from the past. And then the third is the conclusion. No, it's not the conclusion. It says then they have what they have in front of them is a fossil of a mysterious animal, has eyes to the front, and it lacks flat molar teeth. So if you were a paleontologist, your conclusion might be that it were a carnivorous predator, right?
Well, your conclusion would be would be that it was highly probable.
Exactly, and that's precisely why it's given as an example for inductive logic, because you can't say for sure that it's a carnivorous predator because you haven't ever seen it like predate or eat meat, right?
Yeah.
So I guess my question would be, are you equating carnivore with predator?
Well, that's what the conclusion is, that it's a carnivorous predator because they know that every known predator has eyes to the front of its skull and not to the side. And then another thing that they're leading themselves to the conclusion with is that carnivores lack flat molar teeth. So they have these things and then they find a fossil, but they can't just see it eat meat or, Is that a bad example? We can find other examples, but I really think that the way to approach systematic logic is to give examples. And as people go through those examples, they understand why it's more of like a probability instead of just a deduction.
Nora, I think that's a good example. I think that's a good example.
There's other types of organisms that also digest meat, fungi types, plants.
What did you say,
They don't
Nami?
have eyes, really.
Go on, Nami.
Yeah, Nami?
I think that's a good example of inductive reasoning, and I don't think we should get sucked into actually discussing predators and things like that here. We're just trying to establish.
Oh, I know that. That's what why I want to just hear whether that was a good example and move on to another example.
Yeah.
It doesn't, Arwin, it doesn't have to do with the particulars of the example. We're trying to give examples so that we can see the form that an inductive argument works like.
She's just trying to illustrate the structure.
I'm just taking things overly literal as I usually do.
Exactly. So, and we know that, but that's okay. So
yeah, well, I could just say like a snake's eyes are not on the front of its head, and it's a predator. So, I mean, right away, the argument, it's not a great argument, but it doesn't matter because she's just explaining what the principle is. So it's fine. It doesn't matter.
We could find more, but what I'm saying is that it's better to go through examples to see the difference between deductive and inductive.
No. Are you familiar with Popper's work?
Yes, I read his book a number of years ago, explaining his criticisms with the scientific method as it stood in his time, and then his proposal to introduce his idea of what should define a scientific theory, which is the idea of that when you propose if you have a scientific theory, it should be falsifiable in principle. You should yourself be able to propose some kind of experiment that would falsify your own idea in order for it to be a valid one.
Yeah. I've only
Right?
just discovered him just through research. I hear people talk about falsifiability, and I don't quite understand what that means. So you go on Google, and then this guy Popper appears, and he's got a wealth of information.
Yeah, it's very good. It really clears up a lot of the. It's a very strong approach to to clearing up some of the epistemological problems that arise when trying to understand those scientific methods.
Yeah.
But,
Mark?
Yeah.
I kind of see it as just leaving it open to being disproven. Does that make it clear?
That's where I always am. It's open. What have you got to offer me? And I will process it.
Well, like Popper's idea would be that, for instance, that the idea that, say, the stars are other suns, that the stars have some kind of intrinsic similarity to the sun, right, isn't a falsifiable hypothesis or theory.
Right.
You can't test it. So
exactly.
So, it's really good at just kind of demarcating the, what could be considered, what could validly be considered a scientific theory. Although,
well, let's start with confirming something is physical in an actual location first.
Although what an astrophysicist, I think, would respond to, if you were to say that, is that they would say, well, it's falsifiable in principle. That, right? That, so some people...
Yeah, in other words, it's presuppositionally acceptable.
Or that they would say that, we may not be able to falsify it in our lifetimes, but it's still a falsifiable theory, right? So there's different arguments that arise out of that as well.
Yeah, well, they're always full of excuses, aren't they?
Yes.
It's a giant presuppositional religion, all of it.
But,
but I do think... Oh, sorry. Go on.
No, you go ahead.
I just thought I was about to say that it is a good basic principle by which to demarcate things within the scientific method from pseudoscience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With real science, you got to start out with actual, real, provable, tangible things. That's the funny thing about the scientific method.
Alwyn, did you hear Nathan's show today?
Oh, yeah.
And who's the other, German or Dutch? Zinder. He was saying
he's Swiss.
Did you agree or disagree with what he was saying?
Well, he's a glober, and for a glober, he's very sportive, very polite. But yeah, other than that, he's still a glober with everything that comes with that.
No. You missed. You didn't hear what I asked. He was saying that science is not established. It's open to correction.
Yes, officially, that's true. If you find something better and you can confirm it, and that this confirms what has been established earlier, yeah, that's how they do things. But what they leave out of that is that the way they do that is a very controlled, hierarchical process. They don't just let things randomly change the narrative at all.
You're bringing different flavors into it. Let's just be cold and logical here. Is science established, or is it waiting for correction?
Officially, it's waiting for correction.
Good one. That's something I've learned in recent days. Nothing is established. If you're prepared to say this is the truth, then you've closed your mind to further investigation or further information.
Right. You should be saying this is the truth as far as we can deduce it.
Good man. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah,
I would agree with that too. It's like the truth that is something that we say about reality that corresponds to the actual reality, but we're imperfect. So we can only ever approximate that. That's why we have to leave it open to falsifiability, because we're not perfect. That's how I see it.
Well, and then but you got to remember that it specifically applies to the scientific method, which, like, Marisa and Nathan are always pointing out, is about hows and whys rather than about what is questions.
Well, yeah, establishing the relation between cause and effect is in the scientific method, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and so maybe there may be observable things that, for us to, there might be self-evident truths that for which we don't, that we can't, to which we can't apply the scientific method, that in turn don't require we don't have to regard them as being unfalsifiable or falsifiable.
Would you class those, Nami, as axioms, axiomatic truths?
Yeah, well, you can't have you can't begin any sort of logical process without having axioms.
Axioms, right. And axioms and definitions are like the starting principles.
They mean self-evident truths or assumptions that you carry in. I mean, even the idea of the scientific method itself has axioms and assumptions built into it, right? Like just the idea that that repeatability equals truth, that the universe has a consistency to it. I mean, and that's probably true, right? I mean, the fact that
even axioms can be overthrown.
Yeah, they can, but I mean,
maybe axioms may turn out to be not quite such axioms.
Right. So that's why the scientific method itself only has a certain probability of being true.
But the axiom takes a certain place in the series of steps you take in the logic, where you use it as a starting point, and it's a thing that seems self-evident.
Well, those are things that you have to agree on with the people that you're communicating with.
Right. And we agree they are self-evident, and then we proceed from there.
Right. Like that's why, you can have logical arguments you can have logical theological debates if you have certain assumptions in common with the person that, if you both agree that the Bible is the inspired word of God, then if two people can agree that that's a premise that they agree on, then they can proceed from there to have a logical argument about certain meanings. But if somebody doesn't accept that that's the case, then you have to rewind, you have to step back even further and establish.
That's right, because you've agreed on your terms. That's why we have that's where we have the expression to come to terms with, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's like accepting the Bible to be the Word of God is kind of a presuppositional position by itself.
But if two debaters accept that, then you've got a stepping stone to go further on.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering. I just brought up axiom because I'm wondering where we fit it in the Nathanian scientific world.
Nathan,
I was going to say,
with that. He does a great job. I love him.
I know. Yeah. I do love Nathan's show.
He has the best strict teacher voice ever.
Yeah, but it's at the same time, I do have some criticisms about it, because the truth, the sort of underlying trick, and I wrote this in the comments here, is that they don't consider the shape of the Earth to be a scientific question, right? I mean, they're correct in this, that it's a what is question rather than a question about cause. So when they're kind of baiting people into the debate.
Well,
saying,
to clarify that, I know.
Hey, I'm not done. Okay.
Sorry.
What I'm saying is that they ask people to provide scientific evidence for the globe, but there is absolutely no argument or evidence that anyone could present that they would ever consider to be valid evidence.
It's actually a trick question, and that's the whole hilarious thing about it, is that the opponents are so religious they just can't allow that basic simple principle to sink in.
So really,
that's the irony of the entire debates.
But it's kind of like,
just don't get it.
I find it personally, I think it's a little bit boring after a certain point, because I think that it would be more genuine to have the philosophical discussion about that subject itself, I guess.
Yeah, but it's not just a philosophical discussion or even a technical discussion. It's also an exposure of the psychology of this world.
Well, it's really a debate about what science is, and I tend to side with them on that. I tend to agree with their argument about what the question of the shape of the Earth isn't really subject to experiment and is therefore a more, I agree with that kind of epistemological approach to understanding the scientific method as about establishing cause and effect relationships.
Right. Just the original rigid hardcore truth, no spinning around it, no veils.
But at the same time, inviting people into that kind of a debate when it's really just a disagreement about axioms is kind of disingenuous, in my opinion.
My problem
it's just hardcore, literally hardcore.
Well, it's hardcore disingenuous.
Just the hardcore bottom line truth.
Well, I guess you could look at it that way, but I think there's more to it than that. I mean, I personally have problems with it because...
Of course, the truth sucks. Of course you have problems with it. Everybody has problems with the truth.
No, I don't have problems with the truth, Arwen. I have problems with...
You just said you did.
No, I didn't.
Arwen,
you kind of did.
Don't get contentious. No, me, carry on.
That's not what I said, actually. What I said was that I have some problems with inviting people into a debate situation where as if you under the kind of pretense that there would be a possibility of evidence that they would accept, when really the underlying disagreement is axiomatic.
Yeah, that's what a pit fight is. It's a pit fight. It is what it is.
Yeah, it's what it is.
Showing the raw, everything you got.
Well, it's not showing everything you got. It's really just showing.
It damn well is.
It's really showing, in my opinion, it's showing more of a fundamental difference in how people understand certain terms and certain ideas.
Yeah. In a raw fashion.
So to not address those things, to me, I find that disingenuous on some level. But
they are addressed when it actually comes to that. Yeah, they are addressed. But the funny thing is that most ballers just never even get to that point. And they just keep on doing their routines. They're skipping over little details, not addressing the problem, not answering the question. And it's so neurotic. And that's the hilarious part. If they just came to their senses for a moment, they would actually realize what the hell they were doing. But they don't. And that's why the show keeps on going.
Yeah, but it's, like I say, from my perspective, the formula gets a little tired.
Arwen?
You can't keep on following it every day. I agree to that. Everybody needs their breaks. But yeah, I love it.
It's repetitive what Nathan's game is too. Nathan's game is also repetitive. And I think that Nathan...
what works.
The trick, I know it works, but he never takes into consideration that the word science is actually just a word for knowledge, and that science also has a definition, a systematically organized body of knowledge on a particular subject. And he's kind of playing on this kind of ambivalence of the term.
Well, nobody's challenging those bodies.
He wants to stay with the definition of science as being anything that can be tested by a scientific method.
Right.
We understand that. We understand that he uses that to trap the globers. We understand that. But we also
claim the scientism community lays that they are scientific. That's what the flat Earth debates is all about. Because Nathan's not going to contest with all the knowledge that has been deduced from chemistry and everything. He knows better than to distrust that,
Yeah.
Well, yes, and it is the best basis to try to keep pseudoscience out of the subject. I understand that. But
then you have no more discussion because that's what the globers are all about.
Systematically organized bodies of knowledge exists in other disciplines, and they are called sciences, and they don't use the scientific method.
Yeah, it's a rhetorical strategy that really has more to do with definitions and axioms than it does about evidence and experiment.
Yeah. And it works a treat. It's very entertaining.
Yeah, I think it's very valuable because I think it's
guys. Come on.
Yeah.
Be realistic. It has helped us to progress a lot of knowledge. We
Absolutely.
figured out the horizon and the miraging zone all on the debates.
Yeah.
Okay, we did that. We figured out that, also I have to take credit there for a moment, that the globe of the heavens and all the celestial bodies are not capable of being proven physical. Okay, the progress, real progress, honesty, things that cleared up. We did that on the debates.
Well, I think
All
we
of
could
us.
have found, we could
You
have
were
come to
part of
those
the
conclusions.
process.
We could have come to those conclusions without following through Nathan's very entertaining game, I think.
Yeah, I think
That was the platform.
the show is ultimately more about the emotional gratification of people who already agree with what is being argued than it is about the discovery of knowledge. Although there's exceptions to that. You're right. I mean, there has been some things that have worked out, but
The show has to go on, So
No, say that again.
daily
It
show.
was beautiful.
Sorry?
Say that again. That was beautiful. What did you say?
I can't remember now.
I know what I said, and it is the show must go on. So there must be an entertainment value upheld, or it's going to die out. It's just a raw fact of what it is. Nathan is open about it. He says, I'm trying to make sort of a living out of this. He does it for the money. I admire him for his honesty at that.
Well, okay, what I said was that I think the show exists more for the emotional gratification of people who are already on the side of the flat earth than it does for the furthering of scientific knowledge.
Well, there's a big market for that because there's a lot of flat earthers now. And they need this encouragement. They need to see that this crazy globe religion with their wizardry and their details in math and all that shit can be overcome by taking them by their core foundations.
Oh, and if there's a monetary reward, if there's a monetary reward for it, then it removes honesty.
I don't think that that's necessarily true, but it certainly doesn't. It's certainly you have to. It demands that we kind of ask that question. But I mean, I don't think that financial reward is not necessarily equate to dishonesty or to
absolutely.
It's more than a game of cards, though, isn't it? Nominal.
It's just a strategy. It's just a strategy of what are you going to present? What are you going to push forward? That's all. What it's really about is the honesty factor and the consistency.
Yeah, but I think
has
that
Nathan done any flip-flopping ever?
No, but I mean, I don't think that his show could.
Okay,
for Arwen,
4 years.
Arwen, you're just talking over people after you ask a question. I'm trying to answer it.
Okay.
Because what I was going to say was that I think that part of the problem is that when you take the approach of name calling and berating people and calling them retarded and things like that, you kind of paint yourself into a corner where even if there was any sort of mistake potentially that would need to be acknowledged, it would completely destroy any credibility you've had once you've been talking like that. Yeah. So I mean, I don't think Nathan is in a position to admit any mistakes at this point.
No, that's absolutely not true. He's admitted to many mistakes.
No, I agree with you, Nami. He does paint himself into a corner where if he takes that position, it would be very embarrassing for him to admit certain mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Like what?
What do you mean,
what mistakes?
Well, I'm not identifying a particular mistake.
So why are you pointing at a phantom mistake?
No,
I'm not pointing at a particular mistake or not. I'm just saying that
what is this? I don't get it. Why are you doing
you
this?
don't get it. That's the problem.
Well, Nathan has made mistakes.
Yeah, he has, and he's admitted to them and
not all of them.
Well, I would say that
which one hasn't he?
I can't remember, but I know that I've gone through a lot that he hasn't.
I think that
can't remember it. It can't be that important.
I'll tell you later.
I personally find this idea that when this argument about a pressurized system next to a vacuum comes up, and then you claim that to consider the idea of a pressure gradient as being relevant to the discussion as being a red herring, I don't agree with that.
kind of
I-
is.
Well, I know that,
gradients can be proven in smaller closed systems.
Yeah.
well, I have certain disagreements with that approach to the argument. I don't think it really. Yeah.
I agree with
Okay,
you.
so
Nana.
can you
Yeah.
disprove that? Because I can think of several examples on the top of my head of small containers having gradients several ways, including gas.
Well, we were
Here's-
just speaking in general about the infallibility of Nathan.
So
Okay,
wait. I'm just saying that if you listened more carefully to what I said was that the part is not necessarily the outcome of the disagreement. It's more about that when somebody brings up the idea of the pressure gradient itself being a relevant point in the discussion, that's dismissed as a red herring fallacy. And that's the part that I disagree with. Apart from whatever the final outcome of the argument is, I don't think that, because you're ignoring
some new data being interjected at a moment when a specific answer to a specific question is being requested, you mean?
No, yeah, well,
because that is what he points at. It's a red herring. Like, yeah, you're trying to avoid the question.
No, you're not.
You can't always take anything that's kind of interesting. You can't give them their way. That's what he's trying to do. You can't give them their way. Just if they hand a piece of interesting information everyone would like to delve into just to avoid the question, then
I just don't agree.
They can always bring up more interesting stuff.
Okay. All right, Arwen.
All right.
Have you been drinking?
Yeah, a little.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Shows.
Don't worry about it.
Well, I'm not worried about it, but it's kind of makes for a less productive discussion because I can tell, and
I disagree.
You're being a little sloppy.
No, I think I'm being very hardcore on target, and I'm being unusually interruptive and straightforward when usually I know better than to get involved in people's personal feeling regions, really. But I can't help myself because, yeah, the alcohol makes me do that. And that's fine, I still appreciate the discussion, but I think this whole idea of Nathan's not doing it right and then actually bringing forth examples that are purely presuppositional, there's no actual examples of him doing things wrong. It's just,
well,
it seems to me like jealousy, really.
It was just a general critique of him. It wasn't even saying he does a lot of things wrong.
There's no actual examples to
I gave an example. I gave a very particular.
He gave a very good example.
Oh, really? What?
See, this is the problem: is that you're not paying attention, right?
Oh, really? So when did you mention this? Because
I just repeated it. I repeated it twice, and I think that everyone on the panel would back me up that I just repeated it twice to you in the last 10 minutes.
Right,
and I understood what you meant.
I didn't engage into it, right?
Yes, you didn't listen. That's the problem.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I may be distracted by my own motivations. Repeat it to me, if you can.
What I said was that I think that bringing up that to say that somebody wanting to consider the pressure gradient of the atmosphere in the question about the second as to how it pertains to the second law of thermodynamics in terms of whether a pressurized system can exist next to a vacuum is not a red herring in that context.
Why not?
Well, because there's more. Obviously, there's more to it. I mean, there's already pretty much a vacuum at 100,000 feet.
No, not really. But look, it's about the scale. Look, outer space universe, galactic size of vacuum.
I'm not arguing about that. What I'm saying is that
how does the gradient comply to the galactic-sized outer space vacuum?
Well, I'm not saying that it does or doesn't, but what I'm saying is that we already. Okay, whatever.
It just seems like a red herring. It's so obvious that the gradient, whatever causes that, does not comply with the outer space galactic-sized vacuum.
Oh my gosh, I have not been able to figure out why this is going on. But listen, Arwen, I really appreciate a lot of your input, but I feel like we've gotten sidetracked from a productive conversation.
Yeah.
Nummy has mentioned it to you, and I've been trying to say it, but I think my connection has just been bad. But
I hadn't heard you. Sorry.
no, that's okay. That's okay. What I mean to say is that let's try to make sure that we are concise, and that because I brought this up to you once before, that you make a point, you pause, and then someone else starts to talk, and then you continue to talk. So it's a little bit overwhelming, the conversation. So
All right. Yeah, I get it. But yeah,
okay.
you
Thanks.
should know now that I do that. Sorry. It's just sorry. I'm just doing full automatic. You know, that's just the way I work.
We need you to govern that. Thank you.
I can't.
Well, then you're going to get muted.
I try.
Arwen, I don't mean to be rude, but I don't know. I feel like you're kind of ruining the conversation, to be honest with you. Like,
yeah, I'm trying.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I apologize too. My connection must have been bad because I've been trying to say something for the past 10 minutes. It's been absolutely crazy. So.
Yeah, we haven't heard anything.
We heard nothing.
So why don't you say it now?
Oh no! I was trying to get us back on point. That's all, because it happened back when we were talking about Nathan, and I didn't feel like it was a productive conversation. So I was trying to and you guys just kept talking, and I'm thinking they can't hear me. Something's going on with my connection. So no worries. But
okay. Here's the question: is there any such thing as established science?
Thank you for bringing it back to the topic.
Sort of, yeah. Water
Sort of,
boiling and everything, all that.
Well, maybe just to say that the method itself is established, and that seems to be something that comes up in the debate, right? Where there's people claim that, you know, there's this, that the Nathan and Quantum Eraser have introduced this idea of a sort of certain scientific rigor.
It's a script.
You mean the scientific method?
Yeah, no, I agree with that portion.
Right.
But when you're
I
saying
agree with
very rigid.
too.
I agree. And look, I've been frustrated by the scientific method like none else. Okay, I tried to prove gravity; it just didn't work out. I agree with. Tried.
I agree with their sticking to it, and I think that's that's one of the best methodologies we have in science. But as regards science being established, even the scientific method was a development in science as it went along. So you can kind of improve on your methodology.
Yeah, we
wouldn't call it a development, really. I rather call it the foundation. The foundation.
It's a development that happened with Bacon in the 1600s.
Well, the word science just is the Latin word for knowledge. So obviously this word science
exactly
has a longer history than the modern scientific method.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, the word knowledge is older than a scientific method. Yeah, that's true.
Yes, that's why sometimes I do take a bit of issue when they so rigidly stick to only the science definition as science is that which follows a scientific method.
But I don't really get that, because that's when the whole scientism revolution started. Pretty much after that.
Scientific is
so important.
Method is the noun.
Mm.
Scientific method is not science. It's a description of a method.
Well, no, Mark. It really is. It is their official core foundation, and they just bypass it on the spot in your face.
Hang on, Alan. Scientific is an adjective. Is that right?
I don't know, but I know the scientific method is what it is.
I'll answer for Arwen. Yes, it is an adjective.
And the method is the noun.
Yeah, you were talking about this earlier, Mark, and I'm not really sure I understood your point. It feels like it's semantics to me. So let's go back to what Nummy said. Science simply means...
You're cutting that again. You know what? You dropped there for a minute, so can you just repeat yourself?
I was just trying to bring it back to what you said about knowledge. So if science is at its base trying to establish what we know, what's the method by which we operate in order to arrive at science, arrive at knowledge?
Cause and effect.
Okay.
cause and effect relations.
Well,
That's
now
what the scientific method is.
the question you just said, Travis, sounds more like a question of epistemology. It's it's much broader than just natural science.
Okay, but remember what I said, Nora, though. I just went back to what Numi mentioned about the Latin for science, which is knowledge. So I'm just talking about knowledge in general. It could be relational, it could be social, it could be science, I guess what we would call, it could be medical.
You could have a knowledge of the movements of the stars, and it would be astrology.
Well, just from your grandma, you know.
The word has different meanings in different contexts, and the thing is that the word, nobody has the exclusive. Nobody owns the exclusive rights to defining any word, right? The word means what people think it means. Basically, it means how it's used. So the thing is that you have to enter into, if you're going to have a debate, an important debate about knowledge and about the scientific method, these things have to be sorted out in advance. Like, you have to agree on how you're going to define those terms before you. And
I agree.
But they
and
are.
When we get
the
into
scientific method is well defined and rigid.
Nami, I feel like I agree with what you said. I feel like when we enter Nathan's show, it's sort of like you're going into a room where here we narrowly define science as natural science, which follows scientific method. And that's where you go from.
Yeah, which is fine. It's just that has to be, and I think that's made clear in the show.
Yeah.
But it's not, but to say that that's really what science means is false, because
exactly.
Because science, yes, because words are not the words' meanings are
not what they mean. No,
words mean words. The meaning of a word is a description of how the word is used, not a prescription for how it has to be used. Otherwise, that's proven by the fact that the meaning of words change.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, if you do that, then anything goes. So really, you have to start somewhere. And science started with the scientific method. So kind of agree to that, because scientific method is extremely rigid, very hard to fool with. And whatever comes out of it is scientifically established fact.
Right, but there's just this kind of confusion that's sometimes produced by different contexts that the word is used in, even within the show. Like, that this idea that you couldn't refer to a body of knowledge or something, or and then they want to say that to say a body of knowledge is a reification fallacy, which it's not, because it's really
depends on the angle. Now, does it? If it points at a giant body of globe presuppositional knowledge, yeah, it kind of is, and the ballers do that a lot. You know that pretty well, I think.
Yeah, but that's what I agree. It's not a reification fallacy when you use the words that way.
If you're making an analogy, that's valid. I mean, ultimately, most words are analogical in their descriptive form. So,
totally, their words are used to communicate, and if you have to use them even poetically, and you communicate what you wanted to communicate, that's valid.
Goody. That's not really what Flat Earth Debates is about. It's not about people's personal expressions, Yeah, people have their own shows for it. I have a show where I love that kind of thing. When it comes to Flat Earth Debates, it's pretty rigid. It's really about the bottom line, the scientific.
Yeah, but it's true that nobody has a right to the meaning of the word. It shouldn't be prescriptive all of a sudden just because Flat Earth Debates exist doesn't mean that science in the wider sense. Oh dear, you're talking over me.
I don't want to be part of this kind of meta bullshit.
Arwen, you're being very rude right now.
Yeah, it's meta bullshit. Words mean what they mean.
Yeah, but just calm down. We're just having a calm discussion, just trying to sort out some things, and there's no need for you to be hostile, really. She was talking. Why don't you just let her finish?
I was just pointing out that Numi's right, that words shouldn't be so prescriptive that you can't go over to a person and explain to them, oh, I'm using this word in this sense, right? If you communicate that to them, then that's fine. And just because Flat Earth Debates came down the pike doesn't mean that all of a sudden science takes on a narrower word, a narrower meaning forever after. It's just one hangout.
Sorry.
Or you
there's
could
a time
consider
for
that.
poetry, and there's a time for actual science, and it's
Maybe
rigid.
poetry was the wrong word here. I'm sorry, Arwen.
Well, but
Then,
here,
but I understand there's different ways to
Yeah.
use words, okay? But in the scientific method, there really isn't. It's very rigid. That's the point.
Arwen, do you know how dictionaries are created? Do you know how they go about compiling dictionaries?
Not really.
Well, they just basically the dictionary definitions are descriptions of the way that words are commonly used by people, and that's why the definitions change, right? The dictionary isn't there to be a rule book for how words have to be used or that meanings that need to be rigidly adhered to. And it's the same with everything else as well.
No, but
Ultimately,
you're
what
talking
words
about
mean,
general language. Sorry, you're talking about general language, and yeah, again, you can use that in many ways. But when you're talking about science and the scientific method, that's not widely interpretable. Okay, that's
the
very
scientific
rigid.
method
It is
is
very
not widely
specific guideline in
Right.
how words are
No.
interpreted, and there's writing about this.
everything is widely interpretable. I mean,
Yeah, but
everything-
not when it comes to the scientific method. It's not.
But Arwen, we were mostly saying the word science was widely interpretable or had a number of meanings in the dictionary, colloquial meanings. We weren't saying scientific method was so bendable from its meaning.
I know.
People
I
have-
know.
people
There's many
have
words.
fundamental disagreements about the meaning of the scientific method, and they have arguments about how that's defined, and they're valid arguments. And nobody can claim the exclusive authority to say that their meaning is the final word on the matter, really.
And that's why I
if
would
you're
say
gonna
that
claim science
Oh.
like some kind of guide, some kind of authority, then you kind of have to do that. You can't just overuse more general approaches to the word, because I know they're there. They're cultural interpretations. It's become a culture by its own. It's spawned from the religion.
So
But
then who else?
yeah, it is. Nathan just tries to not get into that and actually addresses the core foundation, and it's the scientific method.
anyway, to answer what you said before, Nami, that's why I would say that it is kind of in a developmental process. Human beings are trying to find better and better ways to discover the world around them, and that's why they developed the scientific method.
Yeah,
So-
and it continues to develop as well, because when we look at the introduction of the idea of falsifiability has been within the last century, like Karl
Yes.
Popper's idea, and so the method it's the interpretation of what is gained from the process of enacting the method that ends up changing the definition.
And I think that's good, as long as people's hearts are in the right place. If they really want to obtain truth about the world through it, then they're going to try to make those developments more
Or offline.
more in the direction of its usability, of its utility. You're going to make it better and better, like improving your tools.
Right, which is hopefully you're making it better, and it has a lot to do with just sorting it out with other people. I mean, these things end up becoming social conventions as well, right?
Yeah.
I would say
I
that
agree that the scientific method and everything on top of it can be refined, of course. You can't just keep stuck in a place. But the thing about it is that if it doesn't actually conform to the original scientific method, and you can't actually prove the things that you're applying in your interpretation of science, then you risk entering presuppositional territory.
So Arwen, how would you say, like, how do you identify the original scientific method?
Well, you know exactly what the original scientific method is.
What do you mean? No, I'm sorry. What do you mean by original?
Where it started.
So where was that?
The basic hypothesis.
But who came up with that? Where did that come from?
I don't even know, dude.
Well, yeah. So even one person's idea of the original
OG.
Wasn't it Francis Bacon?
That's what a lot of people say, but I think that that's not. I'm not sure that everybody agrees on that. And obviously, Francis Bacon's precise wording and description of the scientific method has been modified a bit.
Yeah, it's been modified, but he was the first.
Really?
He was the first person to lay out what one could describe as scientific method, I guess.
I
But
would sort of tentatively agree, but I think it's still debatable.
But it's something enough phenomenon.
He was one of the main people to try to solidify the method, but I think if you look up scientific method in Wikipedia, there's a whole centuries and centuries of development.
Right. But we all know where that went. Into
No, we don't all know
presuppositional
where-
theory.
No, Arwin, we don't
They
all know.
added on things to make it more convenient, to make progress without actually having to get into the original concept.
Well, no, we're not using Francis Bacon's method today, right?
Sure. Okay. Fine.
Right. So I'm just saying, when you say the original, you're kind of referring to this kind of Platonic idea of the scientific method as being some, that this thing was born, forged in the in the furnace of truth and came out whole. But that's just not the case. There really is no.
Well, I consider it the brutal, bottom line, honest foundation, really.
Arwen, think of it as similar to the difference between a written constitution and like the English constitution, which is constantly improved upon and changed throughout the years.
Right. You have to start somewhere.
Right. Well, I just would say,
It's up to the people where they allow themselves to move their constitution. But yeah, it has to start somewhere with some kind of logical certainty, basically. And I think the scientific method is a good foundation.
Yeah, and it's constantly being improved and changed.
I disagree to that.
Okay.
It's just more stuff being added on to allow easy progress.
I want to make.
PMARS, what's your understanding of the scientific method?
I really don't think about a whole lot. It's just what observe a phenomena, then what do you create a hypothesis? I'm probably going to screw this up. Then you test it, experiment.
You're doing pretty well.
Check the data, then determine like a result based on the data.
You're missing the independent variable and dependent variable.
Hang on a minute. We're asking PMARS. Is there any flaws in that method, do you think, PMARS?
Well, I got into the philosophy of, okay, so that would be empiricism, like discerning truth through empiricism. And there's a couple flaws, because if you have an empiricistic viewpoint, you make two dogmatic claims you can't justify, which would be the uniformity of nature and the reliability of sense experience in terms of induction. So, I mean, at some point, you have to have faith or a belief in something, and there's really no getting away.
A consistency of reality. That's
hang on. It's between me and PMARS at the moment. So you see there's a flaw in the scientific method, PMARS?
Well, of course. I mean, there's no like way to discern truth in a method that's like absolute, I would say, right? There's always going to be a flaw in any method where you're trying to.
If you could refine that method, would you know where to make the adjustments?
See, I think the best is to have more than one method. See, like I think science and religion can go hand in hand and work together to figure out the truth. You know, science is probably better equipped to discover truths about the natural world, where religion can handle the supernatural world, like metaphysics. So,
but one could debate that there is no supernatural world that can be agreed upon, at least.
Do you mean what happens after death, PMARS?
Yeah, stuff like that, right? Yeah.
Because that's not part of our argument, our debate at the moment.
I'm out of here. Good night.
I know, but I'm saying like if you're trying to find truth, like empiricism wouldn't be a good way to discover truths about life after death, right? Because there's no way to empirically test it. So that's where religion might have a method that could be better served